Masha Karp, you are the author of George Orwell and Russia, and you had the experience of reading 1984 illegally, in secret, in the Soviet Union. Tell us about it.
Well, it wasn't the first book that I read illegally, but as many others, you only received a clandestine book for a couple of days and nights. So I remember distinctly that the book was with me in my early 20s, I would say, in the 70s, when I read it. I had it for a couple of days, and I was trying to remember whether I read it in English or in Russian.
Oh, right, okay.
And I can confirm, I think, that I read it in Russian, because I remember my mother reading it at the same time as I did. My father had read it previously, and my mother was the person that was really scared by having the book lying around, and especially as she started reading it, she asked me, do you think it's safe to leave the book at home for the night?
Mm-hmm.
Because although it was Brezhnev's time, Mom obviously had all the experience of Stalin's times, and she knew, as Orwell says, I think on the very first pages of 1984, that they inevitably came at night to do the search and to take away the victim that they were going to arrest. Mm-hmm. So the closer the night was approaching, the more worried Mom became, and she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Mom, what are you talking about? We are not under Stalin anymore." But the problem is that the feeling that she had was very understandable, because the main thing that people felt when they were reading 1984 in the Soviet Union was that this book was about us. Mm-hmm. And how could he possibly know all these details, starting from the radio, well, in his case telescreen, but from the radio broadcasting something in cheerful tones about the fantastic achievements of our industry, and all this contrasting very vividly with the bleak life we then lived. Starting from this very beginning, the lift not working, and the misery of it all, this was very familiar, very recognizable.
Right, so you've described this fear that was in the house, and you write in the book that possessing this book was not only not allowed, it would have been considered possession of anti-Soviet agitation and propaganda, and you could have been charged under Article 70 of the Soviet Criminal Code.
This is true. It was a criminal offense. Obviously, they would not go searching every student flat, but theoretically, of course, because everybody knew that it was an anti-Soviet book. And 1984 was an anti-Soviet book par excellence, because I remember actually at about the same time a friend telling me that during the search he had in his house. It was obviously my father's friend rather than mine, a much older person. They took Vladimir Nabokov's Spleen away, a book about a Russian emigre, basically harmless and innocent. Well, not quite, of course, but much less to the point of criticizing of the Soviet Union. This man was then arrested, and that's why when he came to us and he saw Pnin just lying around, he said, "You don't want to, to have it just lying around," because they had taken it away when they came to search my place.
So one thing I should clarify for listeners is we're talking about the Soviet culture of samizdat, circulating forbidden texts in an unpublished form which people had typed and retyped with carbon paper. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
In this particular instance, it was, I'm pretty sure, it was a tamizdat, a foreign edition of a translation of George Orwell, because I remember it was a proper book. It was a very different book from the books we had in the Soviet Union. It was a paperback, and obviously the font, the script, the size of the book was different. But it was a book. It wasn't like a typed version, typed and later a bound version of something. I remember reading Yevgenia Ginsburg's In the Whirlwind, Memoirs of the Gulag, in this particular samizdat version, where you could see that it was a typewriter. No, this was a printed edition, which was, I'm sure, secretly delivered to the Soviet Union.
Right. So for listeners, we should clarify that samizdat means self-published, something that's produced by hand. And tamizdat means something produced over there. In other words, something produced abroad and then smuggled into the USSR.
Yes. Yeah. So 1984 that I read in the 70s, it was a tamizdat book. And
tell me a little bit more of the culture surrounding the circulation of forbidden texts. So how did you get your hands on this particular volume?
Maybe because I was trying not to remember it. I really don't remember who gave me this book and for how long. I suppose it was 2 or 3 days. But I do remember distinctly how I read Dr. Zhivago at my friend's house. It was also a tamizdat book, a small edition like this in Russian, obviously. But this is something I remember. I don't remember any of these particulars about 1984. I just remember that I brought it home, that I started reading it, and I told Mom that she could read it as well, and we had it at home for several days and nights, as I said.
Right, so you must have discussed it and compared notes, compared your conclusions.
Yes. Well, we both said it was scary. Of course, that was the main feeling we had. Yeah.
Well, let's go to your book now, and you start in an unexpected place with Esperanto in the 1920s, a kind of real-world newspeak. Tell me about the importance of Esperanto to socialists in the 1920s.
Well, it was particularly Orwell's case. I don't think that everybody who was at that time on the left and dreaming of socialism necessarily went through the Esperanto stage or through Esperanto experience. But Orwell had his favorite Aunt Nellie, who moved in with the Eugenio Lanti, a French socialist and one of the founding members of the French Communist Party, who was 10 years younger than she was, but she was so enthusiastic about Esperanto as the language of the working class that would allow people of different countries be free from bourgeois culture. That was the idea that Lanti had, that with the national language, people imbibe the culture which necessarily leads them to the split between the bourgeoisie and the working class. If everybody spoke Esperanto, thought Lanti, people would be sort of on the same page. They would not be divided by the authorities, by the capitalists, into their separate national homes. They all would be together. And Lanti was very how should I put it? He was very coherent. He was very logical in what he was proclaiming, and he insisted on speaking Esperanto at home. Now, young Eric Blair, because he wasn't yet George Orwell, he was Eric Blair, he had a very mixed feelings towards it. So I would say that originally he hated Esperanto as much as he possibly could, because he had a wonderful talent for languages. When he was in Burma, he spoke several Indian languages, and he could read them. And most importantly, he adored the English language. He adored the poetry of the English language. He adored the richness of it. And to have the language flattened to a very primitive set of prefixes, suffixes, ungood, double plus good, and things like he later satirically described as newspeak in 1984, was something that really annoyed him. And we also know why Esperanto was so important in his life. He didn't particularly like his aunt's partner, and we know admittedly only of one episode, but we know of one episode of a huge argument that young Eric Blair had with Lanti, because Lanti very early in mid-20s, maybe mid to late 20s, had already got acquainted with the Soviet Union and the way the socialist dream transformed there. I mean, and he was trying to explain to a young man, who Eric Blair obviously was, that communism is not such a great idea, that the result of the revolution that he personally pinned so much hope on, and just everybody hoped that it would be a liberation of the working class and the triumph of the working class, led in fact to the poverty, to people walking barefoot in the center of Moscow. I can imagine Lanti being absolutely shocked by it, because I'm sure they did not walk barefoot in the center of Paris. in the early 1920s. And here he is coming to the country of the triumphant working class, and he sees that workers and peasants, they just don't have shoes in a very, very inclement climate of Moscow. So, but that was only one thing. He was shocked by the bureaucracy. He was shocked by people thinking that communists are sort of a new bourgeoisie and new bosses. He was shocked by the new economic policy, which of course today people who really hoped for the improvement of the life of the workers think with approval of. And Lenin, in his last days, he thought, something has gone wrong, probably. We need to allow a bit of freedom, allow a bit of a market into our life. But of course, when Stalin came and he decided to carry on with this very rigid, very authoritarian policies, and 1929 became the year of the start of totalitarianism, as later historians would call it, meant the end of NEP, the end of the new economic policy. For Lanti, an idealist, this sudden switch back to the market was a shock, but he had to admit that what had been happening before that did not really work. It didn't bring the hopes for the state of workers and peasants to fruition.
So the surprise we encounter in this chapter, we've got young Orwell, then Eric Blair. He's finished his time in the Imperial Police in Burma. He's visiting his aunt in Paris. He encounters this guy, Lanti, and in the account we have, Orwell is the one who's sympathetic to communism, and Lanti is the one who's telling him no.
We are not 100% sure that in this argument, of course, young Eric Blair was expressing his true feelings. Orwell has always been a contrarian. Mm-hmm. He might have teased the older man, just trying to get the arguments out of him.
Test him out and find out what's real. Yeah.
I'm sure the memoirs of Lanti's friend who left this account of them shouting mercilessly at each other, it really reflected the height of feeling on both sides.
Yeah.
But this is one thing that we know about Lanti, and we don't know what we don't know, and I want to emphasize that. We don't know to what extent Orwell knew about the destruction of Esperanto movement in the Soviet Union in the later years. We don't even know to what extent Lanti knew about it. But Lanti fell a victim of this destruction even before his Soviet Esperanto colleagues were killed or arrested by Stalin in the 30s. Mm-hmm. The idea of the people there in the Soviet Union was that wonderful, we are uniting workers of the world by the Esperanto.
Internationalism.
Internationalism, organizing correspondence, movements between workers of different countries, and so on and so forth. And Lanzi was trying to make as many compromises as he could to keep this movement together. But obviously, the Soviet Esperantists were not free. And the moment the Soviet authorities changed their minds about foreigners altogether, what I find particularly poignant, it wasn't just Esperantists who wanted to connect people of different countries of the world. There were stamp collectors, people who just wanted to remember that other countries exist.
Yeah.
And they have different postal systems. In 1929 or even earlier, Stalin took a course on isolationism. And the famous formula, socialism built in one country in the world, it had these practical consequences of trying to get away from the rest of the world. I can't help saying that this movement towards the world and away from the world has been happening for the next 100 years, and the stage we're in now is the attempt to build a new Iron Curtain, to have independent, sovereign internet. Today it just sounds like madness, but that's exactly the same feeling. We, Russia, we are separate, we have our own way, your concepts of democracy, of human rights, and so on, as they formulated it later and as they formulated today, it all started very early. And obviously, Esperantists, as people of the world, as cosmopolitans, they were doomed in the climate like this.
Right. So you call the chapter The First Vaccination. So that's Orwell's first main encounter with doubts and dissent among people of the left toward the Soviet Union. And then the next interesting character you introduce is his landlady. So as the book moves into the 1930s, we find Orwell living in North London, surrounded by socialists of various types. And two things are happening. One is that he's moving toward becoming a socialist himself. The other is that he begins to notice that parts of the British left have a lot of illusions about the nature of Stalin's Soviet Union. But tell me about some of the influences of that time, starting with his landlady.
Right. You want me to pronounce her name in Welsh. I've heard so much controversy about it.
Ms. Westrop.
Miss Westrop, yes, Mi Fonvi, I think, or My Fonvi, because this is a Welsh name. She was a remarkable woman, and she was an Esperantist and a friend of Aunt Nellie and of Lanti, and she subscribed to Lanti's magazines, but she also was a member of the Independent Labour Party, and this, of course, is a very interesting phenomenon in the history of the British left, because the Independent Labour Party actually was founded, it started before the actual Labour Party later on. But these were people, in a way, they were more to the left than the Labour Party later became. But the thing is, what we know about Eric Blair, about Orwell already, because in 1933 his first book, Down and Out in Paris and London, was already published, so he officially became George Orwell because he didn't want to embarrass his family with the book he had written. But it's
a pretty gnarly book.
A pretty
gnarly book.
Yeah, well, he was that was his one of his first three sort of documentary books, because we know his essays, we know his novels, and the three books Down and Out, then The Road to Wigan Pier, and then Homage to Catalonia, the books based on his actual experiences.
Yeah.
Now, we know from friends who he made when he lived in Hampstead in London, starting with Mrs. Westrope and his other friends, that although the other people who gathered in this house in Hampstead, where Orwell worked in a bookshop and also lived renting from the Westropes, they were constantly arguing about socialism. He kept silent. So something was going on, but he wasn't yet ready to express his views, because on the one hand, he that was the zeitgeist, the understanding that there is no alternative to the miserable condition of the working classes at the time, and then socialism. On the other hand, he already knew from Lanti and from conversations with other people there that socialism in the Soviet Union did not really work as they all had hoped for. And that is why, if you look at the road to Wigan Pier from this point of view, you will see that there isn't a single positive word about the Soviet Union there. He calls Bolsheviks half gramophones, half gangsters, which is a very appropriate term, and it is, I'm pretty sure that he took this bit of a gramophone from the conversation that Herbert Wells, H.G.
Wells, yeah.
H.G. Wells had with Stalin, and H.G. Wells, of course, was shocked that how Stalin replied to all his questions with sort of ready-made formulas. And I think, was it Keynes or somebody else, but somebody said that was a conversation with a human being with a gramophone.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Bolsheviks had this tendency of repeating formulas and at the same time proclaiming rather brutal approaches to dissenters made Orwell think of this wonderful formula, half gramophones, half gangsters. But this in this book, especially as he was writing it, and as the fascism in Spain raised its head, Orwell moves towards the ideal socialism, to the socialism as the only force that can resist fascism.
Yes.
And he talks about socialism as an ideal, that is liberty, that it is freedom, that it is something that all normal people aspire to and should support, not to let fascism win.
Yeah.
So that was the trajectory. He says he acts as a devil's advocate in this book. Frankly, I try to show that this might also be a bit of a pretense to bring out the arguments on all sides. And when he describes the flats for workers where they moved by the charitable councils where they could live a better lives, he still resists this idea of the kindness and benevolence imposed from above.
Right, there are too many rules.
Too many rules and too many rules, too many orders. You don't do that, you do that, do this. And although it can't be worse, he says, obviously it is better to live in a clean flat and not in some dilapidated houses at the outskirts. Still, you can feel that this is not something that he personally would approve of.
Yeah. So Orwell is attracted to socialism, as he writes, as an antidote to poverty and as a means of confronting fascism, but he's also concerned with cranks and crankiness and the kind of weird characters you find at leftist meetings who have a lot of illusions, a lot of they have a lot of illusions and kind of out there beliefs, and he also starts to identify public figures with whom he has major differences. One of them is Bernard Shaw, who in the early 1930s is trying to deny the famine connected with collectivization of agriculture, and also the Fabian socialists Sidney and Beatrice Webb, who seem to think of themselves as a possible vanguard in a British Revolution. Middle-class revolutionaries.
True. I mean, Bernard Shaw really disgusted him by his admiration, not only for Stalin and Mussolini, but generally by this admiration for strong characters.
Yeah.
And he draws in one of his essays, he draws this line back to Carlyle, who also was an admirer of strong men. A slightly different aspect is annoying Orwell in the Webbs. Because the Webbs seemed to have shared the ideas of Lenin of the party of the new type. Mm-hmm. What exactly does it mean? It means professional revolutionaries like Bolsheviks, like Lenin and his comrades, leading the mass of the working people. And it's interesting that Borkenau mentions, I haven't yet introduced Borkenau, but
right, Orwell's Austrian socialist friend who he meets in the early 30s.
Yes, who basically was a great expert on the communist movement. He quotes at some place, I don't even remember if I quoted in the book, I might have done, he quotes Rosa Luxemburg. Mm-hmm. Who said you can't have the leaders of the working class party. The working class movement is the party. And that was something that eventually led the Bolsheviks to all the totalitarian consequences of this that we know better. And the Webs, probably subconsciously, they had this feeling that we, the clever ones, we, the educated ones, we, the ones who know the theory, we will lead you, the simple souls, to the heights of socialism. Orwell hated it, obviously.
The stupid cult of Russia, as he called it.
Yes, absolutely, and he, for him, it's, you see, it's all. I think the Road to Utopia is one of his really poetic books. Funnily enough, it's partially autobiographical, partially is theoretical, but for him, all this is bound together. Even with this cult of the machine, of this glitter of newfangled apparatus, which take precedence over something that he personally loved so much, the countryside, the animals, the plants.
The golden country.
The golden country that he, that forever remained for him the ideal. So this Soviet insistence on these glittering machines, which he actually has also, which he also writes about in the first pages of 1984, this ideal of strong, handsome men and women against the background of steel and concrete buildings and machines. For him it all is anti-human, because as I think it was George Woodcock who said it about him, Orwell primarily was a humanist. And sort of this humanism came into clash with the idea of socialism, although he had never found out what other alternative to the brutality of capitalism there could be. But all his life he was torn between his innate feeling of his admiration for a human being and his belief in a human being as such, and the system that basically is aimed at telling a human being what to do. So that was one of the dilemmas that he had been struggling all along. And in the book, incidentally, I have to come back to the issue of socialism, and it's not because I was so obsessed by it, but because Orwell was obsessed by it. And later on in his life, he was trying to compare the ideal socialism and the socialism that existed in the Soviet Union, which he would not grant the name of socialism at all.
Orwell then takes off for Spain to fight in the Spanish Civil War, so to fight for the Spanish Republic against Franco's fascists and to write about it. But instead of joining the international brigades, like most foreign volunteers, he ends up joining an anarchist militia called the POUM, Workers' Party of Marxist Unification. And as the USSR gains leverage over the Spanish government through its military support, Orwell and his friends find themselves being hunted as Trotskyists by Stalin's NKVD, in a creepy parallel with the Moscow show trials, then going on in Russia. Tell us about Orwell's encounter with Stalinism in Spain.
Well, that was obviously the main influence for the main episode that helped Orwell to understand what was actually going on in the Soviet Union. After all this gradual preparation, he actually saw it with his own eyes when he was in Spain. Mm-hmm. Now, in my understanding is that in the homage to Catalonia, he slightly, as he does in his other documentaries, he slightly adjusts the reality to make this shock stronger. Mm-hmm. Why do I think that was the case? Because the newspaper of the Independent Labour Party, a sister party to POUM, had been writing about the attempts of the Soviet communists to attack POUM even before Orwell went to Spain. My feeling is that when he says, oh, it was so difficult to find out who was who in all these abbreviations, Spanish abbreviations of different parties and all that, he slightly feigns his innocence, his confusion about it all. He must have known about the tension that had existed between POUM and the Soviet communists, because POUM was headed by Andres Nin, mm-hmm. The man who spent 9 years in the Soviet Union, was married to a Russian, barely escaped from the Soviet Union back to Spain. He was, of course, a Spanish communist. He was Trotsky's secretary at some point, but very soon split up with him, as basically everybody split up with Trotsky. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to find any figure who started as Trotsky's friend and comrade who would not quarrel with him at some point.
He's known to have been disagreeable, yeah.
Trotsky was very much the person of his rigid views, and as Orwell says in one of his essays, we don't know what would have happened if the roles had swapped and it was Trotsky who would be in charge of the country, and if he had exiled Stalin. Probably Trotsky had never had, he definitely never had this opportunity, but I don't even know whether he had entertained these ideas, because Stalin obviously was a much slyer, much more insidious person. The fact that Nin was Trotsky's secretary, I think, gave Stalin an opportunity to accuse him and everybody who was with him, who was following who was following Trotsky, who was following Andres Nin, to call them Trotskyists. Mm-hmm. And Trotskyist was the name of the enemy in the Soviet Union. You didn't have to have Trotsky's views. You just have to be on the other side to be called a Trotskyist.
It was the key term of abuse in the 1930s, yeah.
Absolutely. And Orwell's very dear friend at this time, George Orwell, who was a very brave fighter, who incidentally came from Russia as a child when he was 9, because his father was persecuted by the Tsarist authorities for protesting against the Tsarist regime, and he lived in Belgium, and then he had because of his family circumstances, and later on he had to flee, and he never ever admitted that he came from Russia, and Orwell didn't know that. I don't think anybody knew that. Kopp kept it kept it a great secret, because he was from Russian Jews, and during the Second World War, the fact that his mom, although, as some of the family remembered, she had Russian icons on the walls, but this wouldn't have saved her in the eyes of the Nazis, of course.
Yeah.
You can pretend whatever you wish to pretend. So Kopp was not the person renowned for his honesty, unlike Orwell, but he was a brilliant, talented man, a very brave fighter, a very true friend to Orwell. And when in the last days, when POUM was announced illegal, when Nin had already been arrested, Kopp was arrested too. And Orwell and his wife Eileen went to visit him in prison, and that must have been a real shock. Even though, as I said, Orwell, who was used to thinking about political circumstances and analyzing them, I'm sure even if he had suspected or had known about the communists really fighting not so much the war against fascism, but the war against the internal opposition, as Stalin did, fighting Trotskyists, he still must have shocked when he saw the people who were ready to give up their lives, as Kopp or Bob Smiley, the Scottish volunteer in the English contingent, who fought side by side with the POUM fighters, that these people were arrested by the Spanish police. That was
at Stalin's behest.
That was a complete reversal of understanding of what's going on for him. And I think the fact that for the next 2 years after coming back to Britain, Orwell wasn't sure that Britain should fight Hitler. It actually can be explained by the fact that he thought, okay, we will fight fascism, Nazism in the face of Hitler, but who will win? We will do it together with the Soviet Union. That is obvious. But then we'll have a different kind of fascism. Because by that time, between 37 and 39, when Stalin and Hitler joined forces, and basically that helped Orwell to understand that both of them were Nazis and countries like Britain, democratic, liberal Europe, should try and fight both of them, at least to understand that they both are on the same side. Before that, he was afraid that fighting against one kind of fascism, Nazism, like Hitlerism, would inevitably bring Stalin to the top. And it's a very complicated matter, because people are usually surprised to find out that Orwell was a supporter of Chamberlain, you know. But
amazing,
at that point, I think it is a continuation. What we need to always remember is that Orwell kept thinking about these political developments and possibilities, and that is why he could make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't want to bring a situation to the present straight away, but we are now in this period of flux, of a dangerous flux, and we don't quite know. Things are not as simple as we, for I don't know, for 70 years after the end of the Second World War, with the world order that basically said that liberal values should resist the Nazism or the totalitarianism. Now suddenly everything seems to mixed up, and each of us has to think very hard about the political situation. Now Orwell is our example of not that he never made mistakes, but that he kept thinking, he kept this social analysis of the events. He found it extremely necessary to understand what's exactly going on, coming to a certain point of view. This person is good, this person is bad, this regime is good, this regime is bad, just leads us to the sheep saying two legs are good, 2 legs are bad, four legs are good. It's a formula. Orwell's political thinking, Orwell's social analysis was against formulas. It was trying to keep thinking in the very difficult and complicated moments of human history.
Yeah, well, I suppose if we try and think historically, a lot of people were trying to avoid war with Hitler in the late 1930s, not least the United States, and even Roosevelt was running on keeping America out of the wars. So I guess that kind of thinking was quite common in the late 1930s.
Well, I think this kind of thinking has been common all these years, even after the Second World War, because naturally people do not want wars. Naturally, people do not want sacrifice the young men of their own countries, But when you see that there is a war going on in Europe has been going on in Europe for 4 years today, you think whether this tendency, this wish to avoid wars, whether it might lead to more dangerous situation.
Well, I think the last year was probably the first in which everyone started to get a sense that Western Europe might not get out of this unscathed. But let's not digress to that. So let's go back to Orwell's war years, the late 1930s and the war years. So he didn't last long in Spain. He had to flee after just a few months. Back in England, he finds that he struggles to publish anything about what he saw in Spain. He's noting lies in the press on both the political left and the political right. Nobody wants to acknowledge anything like what he's witnessed there with the NKVD manhunts, the war within the left, and also, well, he's confronting the Hitler-Stalin Pact in 1939. Around that time, he's also reviewing a lot of books. He reviews Assignment in Utopia by the American Russia correspondent Eugene Lyons, and early anti-totalitarian works by the exiled Austrian sociologist Franz Borkenau. Tell me about how those writers influenced his thinking on Russia in the run-up to World War II.
Well, I think Eugene Lyons, I'll start with Eugene Lyons because this influence, which I think was very, very strong over Orwell, and I'll just give you an example that will obviously, I think, definitely prove it. Orwell did not want to acknowledge it that much, I must say, because I don't know to what extent it was conscious and to what extent it was that what Eugene Lyons was writing in his book, and his book is very lively and very compassionate towards the Russian people. He came to the Soviet Union full of admiration. I think it was at the end of 1928, and he left in 1934. That is before the start of the full-scale Stalin's purges. But things were quite bad, basically from the very start, and it took him some time to acknowledge how bad these things were. But the proof that Eugene Lyons played a very important role in Orwell's thinking is, of course, this poster, 2 + 2 is 5. We reproduced this poster on the cover of my book because it originally, of course, it was the attempt to encourage the Soviet people to work so hard that they would complete a 5-year plan in 4 years.
Yeah.
2 + 2. But Eugene Lyons was probably the first person who wrote about the absurdity, about the childishness, about the lies of these posters, of these formula that was also not only on posters but also in illuminations and lights all over the city, and just any sane person would think that there's something wrong with it. And Orwell puts this formula into the heart of 1984, because the worst part in his thinking about totalitarianism, about what it does to humans, is the attempt to manipulate human minds. And how do you manipulate human minds? You try to instill notions that have nothing to do with objective reality, that have nothing to do with truth. You basically try to instill lies in people's heads. And when we think today, I'm sorry that I keep coming back to it, but when we think today about so many Russians saying, yes, but if we had not attacked Ukraine, they would have attacked us.
Mm-hmm.
They are Nazis, and we have to fight these Nazis, because otherwise, we fought Nazis in 1941, 1945, and here they are again. And it is not only the fear and the subservience, but this is a belief that what our authorities are saying can't be this blatantly untrue. I remember in the first years when people, in the first years of this war, when people were yet not afraid to take part in vox pops, in the foreign stations, polls in the streets. I remember a wonderful woman who was saying, obviously the war is, she didn't use the word war, of course, because that wasn't allowed. Obviously what's going on is awful, but people above us, they are not stupid, are they? And this is something that the population of Russia had been taught to believe for many, many years of the Soviet rule. Then it suddenly, for 30 years under Gorbachev and partially under Yeltsin, it started seeing things differently. And now, of course, they are back to the belief that people above us, they are not stupid, are they? And that is why 2 + 2 is 5. And the fact that O'Brien is trying to make Winston Smith believe, not just repeat, but believe that 2 + 2 makes 5. This is the most brilliant development, I would say, of a real fact of the Soviet history into the extremely powerful image. So that is Eugene Lyons and many other things that he wrote about the Soviet Union in these, not the worst period of the Soviet Union. But Borkenau was different. Eugene Lyons gave Orwell lots of human details. Borkenau was a sociologist. He was a social thinker. And I think for the first time in his life, Orwell, reviewing his book, The Spanish Cockpit, he was impressed by the way the book was written, because it was not that, the book about the political events. He was impressed by literature, he adored literature, but this was writing about the current affairs from the point of view of somebody who is relying on the social science. And that was Franz Borkenau, an Austrian social scientist who, apart from having this education and these interests, he also worked in Comintern for 10 years. His task was to analyze what the communist parties of different countries were writing. He was an extremely talented man, and he learned, I don't know how many languages, maybe 10, maybe more, and Russian among them. And he looked at what was going on in Spain from the sociological point of view. For example, I'm very impressed by the later pages in The Spanish Cockpit. Orwell, I don't think, writes about it, but it's such a brilliant analysis of why Franco's fascism is different from other kinds of fascism, whether we should call it fascism or not. And it was Franz Borkenau who wrote several books which Orwell had reviewed each time with admiration. And he said that if Hitler had made a gift to Britain, to Europe, to the rest of Europe, that was Franz Borkenau, because Borkenau, as a former communist and as half Jew, he obviously had to flee from Austria, from Hitler's Germany, where incidentally, as a student, he was the head of all the communist students of the country. He started very young, and he believed in communism, socialism, and all that. And Orwell reviewed the Spanish Cockpit. Then he reviewed what was the second book? The third book was The Totalitarian Enemy, which Borkenau wrote very fast. And,
number 2 was The Communist International.
Sorry, I missed that because I've already talked about Communist International, and then somehow I skipped it in my mind. Of course, Borkenau analyzed his work and saw, I think it is there that he quotes Rose Luxemburg, who actually was a communist, but she was a communist with a different understanding of the leading role of the party, let's put it like this. So that is a big book, a fascinating book, which Orwell liked very much. And the third book was written after August 1939, when the Nazi Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union signed a pact, and Borkenau compares these two systems. He thought, and I think he influenced Orwell in that as well, that the Soviet Union was a more totalitarian country than the Nazi Germany. And although Orwell admitted that the book was written very much in a hurry, but he still admitted how many important points Borkenau had there. And this understanding, I mean, I think the strength, the power of Orwell lies in this combination unique for him, the combination of an artist, of somebody who was very subtle in psychology, although people very often dismissed his skill as a writer representing the human psychology. I think he was very good at that, but that was one part of his nature, and the other part was his strength as a social analyst, something that actually Borkenau taught him to do. And in the early, I think it was in 1940s, when he and Borkenau met nearly every day. Borkenau lived at that point in London, and they discussed the future. They discussed what could happen, and they were discussing the potential invasion of Hitler and how things could develop. And they both, this I find extremely naive, but also remarkable, that they both hoped that there might be a revolution in Britain, given what's going on, and partially the reflection of these dreams and of this conversation we find in The Lion and the Unicorn, one of the most beautifully written books of Orwell, where he was not right in terms of his predictions, but again, which shows this unique combination in his talent of sociology and art, politics and art, as he very soon realized should be his particular target in writing his books, his particular method in writing his books. So we might say that if Lyons supplied him with details, psychology, and episodes, anecdotes of the real life of and the real life under totalitarianism, Borkenau taught him to analyze it from the sociological point of view. And the third author, of course, maybe to bring in one more name, was Arthur Koestler, who Orwell called the author of who could write about totalitarianism from within.
Yeah.
He was saying that in this country we can't really talk about writing totalitarianism from within. In fact, he himself became this writer, although he had never been to the Soviet Union, but he by the strength of his imagination, this is what I also, of course, explain by his artistic talent, the strength of his imagination of how a person would feel under totalitarianism.
So, Masha, you should flag up for listeners the importance of Darkness at Noon, Arthur Koestler's novel, which Orwell reviews.
Yes, absolutely. I just went straight into Koestler as a person, and as because Orwell had this review. He did review The Darkness at Noon, but basically he spoke about Koestler as an anti-totalitarian author, and several things in his book also contributed to his understanding of totalitarianism and this hatred that totalitarianism has of the past, because the character of Koestler's novel Darkness at Noon, he has two investigators, one of the older style, sort of like an old Bolshevik with ideals, and a new guy who doesn't seem to have any ideals but just wants to be a proper screw in the system, in the totalitarian system built by those above him. So yeah. I think that's a very important contribution that Koestler made into Orwell's understanding.
Right. So three very influential writers who readers of 1984 ought to revisit. So let's go into the war years. So we get the Hitler-Stalin Pact in 1939. Which whipsaws all the British communists. They don't know what to do. They were really against Hitler, and now they've got to pretend that Hitler's not so bad for a few months, and then they've got to go back to their previous position a few months later when Hitler invades the Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, that was Victor Gollancz. Quite an important figure in Orwell's life.
His publisher.
His first publisher, and the publisher he quarreled with in the end, because Gollancz was Jewish. He could not accept the sudden Soviet rapprochement with Hitler.
Yeah.
But of course, when in June 1941 that is nearly 2 years later, a year and so many months later, the Soviet Union was attacked by Hitler, and sort of not by its own volition, but by the circumstances of the war, the Soviet Union became an ally of Britain. And for Britain it was extremely important because since 1939, and especially since the start of the Blitz, the horrible bombardments of the country in 1940 after Dunkirk and all that, Britain had been fighting on its own, and then suddenly this huge, mighty ally. And I can tell you that when I first came to Britain in 1991, I did help an old man go down the stairs at the King's Cross station, and he heard my accent and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, from Russia, from the former Soviet Union." He shouted, "Our great ally!" You know, I was completely taken aback, but that was the position that people in Britain really sincerely shared, because they felt that the Soviet Union was protecting them from Hitler. They forgot about Stalin's brutalities, they forgot about the pact, the fact that Hitler's Germany was bombing Britain with the Soviet fuel. Human memory is short. That was Orwell, something that Orwell was always trying to let his readers, make his readers remember. They forgot all this, and in the wartime Britain, there appeared nearly a cult of the Soviet Union, which was supported by, as always, brilliant infiltration work that the Soviet Union was doing, because the head of the Soviet department in the Ministry of Information was a certain Peter Smollett. That was his pseudonym. His real name was Piotr Smolka, who came from Austria originally, and who was a brilliant agent of influence, who was never exposed, and even received the Order of British Empire, believe it or not. Although all the time of the war he was working for the Soviet Union, trying to explain to the Brits that they don't have a better ally, and the main thing is not to annoy the Soviet Union, not to offend the Soviet Union, as some authors, like a certain George Orwell, wanted to do by their book Animal Farm, where everybody knew that the two main pigs on the farm were Stalin and Trotsky. That was completely transparent, and that showed that the revolution that the ordinary animals managed to have on their farm, it only led to the new autocracy, and there was no difference between humans and pigs by the end of this very short and very powerful fable. So obviously when Jonathan Cape, one of the publishers who originally agreed to publish Animal Farm, when he came to the head of the Soviet department, and that was, as we now know, absolutely for sure, Peter Smollett. He was warned that you can't do these things. Russians are so sensitive. You will offend our ally. So, that was one of the issues that Orwell had to face after he had already written his first masterpiece. Before 1984, it was Animal Farm.
So it's an interesting trajectory. So he's writing a lot of essays throughout the war. I should mention he wasn't able to serve in the war because of the injury that he had sustained in the Spanish Civil War. He'd been shot through the throat, so he hadn't been able to pass the medical exam, but he did join the Home Guard, so he was trying to serve in his own way during World War II. He's writing a lot of essays, but in addition to being a journalist and political man, he's also been a literary figure all along, having published 4 novels by 1939, Burmese Days, A Clergyman's Daughter, Keep the Aspidistra Flying, Coming Up for Air. What's really interesting about the war years and after is that he doesn't write another major work of nonfiction. In other words, he pursues fiction as a way of dramatizing what he's learned about the Soviet system.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's not like anyone wants this fiction. He has a hell of a time getting Animal Farm published.
Well, but that was this realization that he should gel together politics and art. And he wanted to turn political writing into art, which he brilliantly did in both of his novels.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe Animal Farm is more perfect because it's a fable, because you can't add a word or detract a word from it. It's an absolutely perfect work. But I do not belong to those who say that 1984 is somehow substandard, that he was ill, that his mood was bad. I think 1984 is the pinnacle of what he did. It's a very powerful work, precisely because he shows that there is a very real danger of even the best people, the best of people, the best person, the honest and idealistic person like Winston Smith can be manipulated. And it is a very, very, very bitter ending for anybody who reads the book and who identifies with Winston Smith saying to O'Brien, even under the torture, he says, "You won't win. Something will defeat you. The life will defeat you." And we all are on Winston Smith's side, because this monstrosity, this system of killing people, of manipulating people, can't win. And yet, again and again, we see the danger of totalitarians winning. And that is why Orwell's warning worked not only for the particular time. It works because, as I said, it is so much a work of art, 1984. It is so much a work of imagination, of how people behave under different circumstances. And yes, torture can break a very strong human spirit. And yes, the lies upon lies upon lies can make people confused. And the fact that even today in Russia we have these departments of special operations, and I don't mean the special military operation only, that which is a war, but I mean the operations of trying to confuse people, of making them feel that they will never ever learn the truth, that things are too complicated for ordinary people to understand. You know, who killed Litvinenko? Who knows? Who started the war? Who knows? Those above must know better.
Moral and intellectual nihilism. That's the goal.
Yes, nihilism and just manipulating minds. And unfortunately, given the technical advance, the fact that the internet, which is an absolutely incredible tool that we acquired thanks to this, it can also spread this poisonous disinformation. It can do that, and people always have to be on the alert to try and understand what's going on. I gave a lecture on Orwell to students in Prague. And the main question, I was trying to explain that, you know, you have to really be very aware that your mind can be manipulated. And several people asked me, but how do you do it? How do you know that this is true and this is not true? And I said, this is very difficult. You have to work it out for yourselves. You have to try and see who you can trust, who you don't trust, who you shouldn't be afraid to be suspicious, because it might be better to be suspicious than to be too trustful, you know. And but it is one thing when people with the former Soviet or former East European experience come to watch the events of the day. You might say that they are over suspicious. But on the other hand, you sometimes, when you talk to Westerners, you sometimes see this wish to trust that it is too prominent. I remember when the very start, I think it was even in 2014, when the Russians were saying that that in Ukraine the fascists, the right forces, the right sector, if you remember, that they are the sort of real right-wing nationalists are so strong. They're much stronger than any people you might trust. And I remember lots of people in Britain, where I live, just saying, well, but you know, there are these right-wing nationalists there in Ukraine when there was this revolution of dignity. And it was only when the elections were held there and it was obvious that the number of people supporting the proper right wing or proper fascists was much smaller than in France, for example.
Yeah.
You know, only then things started, because people in the West do trust fair elections.
Maybe
In
this is
Russia,
why Trump hates them.
Maybe. But the thing is, in Russia, nobody trusts any election results anyway. So this wouldn't have been an argument for the Russians that, look, the Ukrainians did not vote for right-wing nationalists. You can't say it's a fake who trusts the election results. You know,
Yeah.
so basically, I think this is the most important lesson that Orwell left us in his other books, but primarily in Animal Farm and primarily in 1984, that minds can be manipulated. Not just with torture, but just with very subtle and aggressive propaganda. So I think we have to remember that.
Yeah. Just mindful of time, I want to mention that, well, you finished this book about a year after the full invasion of Ukraine, so you were finishing it during that time. It must have affected your process. How did it affect the writing of the book?
Look, this was, of course, the main shock of the last, decade. If the second one was Trump's support for Putin, I must say, for myself. But what I was trying to say in my book when it was already obvious how Orwellian, in the sense of lies and brutality Putin's regime has become, I wanted to show to Western readers that they should have noticed that things had not been going well for quite some time. Even under Yeltsin, when the Chechen war started, it was already time to pay attention to what was going on in Russia and not to be fascinated by the radiant prospects of Russia becoming a normal country, because the Chechen war showed that it just slid back to its old imperial and totalitarian self. But of course, when Putin came, it became all the more obvious. And in the last chapter, I was trying to show the moments, the moments when the West could have reacted differently. That the moments where Orwell, had he been alive, would have drew attention to, would have drawn attention to, would have cried wolf, would have shown that things were bad. The West, obsessed by its own greed, by its own wish to escape any confrontations, carried on and on even after the occupation of Crimea. Yes, you would say that 2014 changed something, but then another 8 years passed, and then it was just slowly this trickle of help provided by Biden, who I admire very much for doing what he did. It was much more than I had expected America to do, but it was not enough. And the fact that so basically what I was trying to do in this last chapter, which I obviously had to rewrite a couple of times to make it more to the point, I was trying to explain to attract the attention of the Western readers of why Orwell is still so much alive today.
That's probably a good place to leave it, Masha. I'll just read some closing notes. So the book is George Orwell and Russia, published by Bloomsbury. Masha is also the chair of the Pushkin Club. If you're in London, you can keep an eye out for her events at Pushkin House. Masha is also the editor of the Orwell Society Journal, which you get in the mail twice a year when you join the Orwell Society at orwellsociety.com. Full year's membership is £30. My info, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel below, follow me on X at Roland E. Brown, Instagram at Roland Elliott Brown, and follow the Orwellians Substack at theorwellians.substack.com. Thank you, Masha.
Thank you. Thank you.